Washington Journal continues.
Julianne Malveaux, what are you reading this morning?
Well, John Hope Franklin, one of my personal heroes, was just appointed to chair this race panel that President Clinton announced yesterday. And he's just one of the brilliant minds, if you will, of the 20th century. He wrote From Slavery to Freedom, so many of the other very important books about African American history. And I think this panel obviously is very important, but has even greater potential because he's chairing it. At 82 years old, he's a retired professor from Duke University. Bill Raspberry had a beautiful column on him. There's also something else in the Post. I think all the papers have covered it. We're all looking to see what President Clinton will say tomorrow, but I think whatever he says, and I always have my pros and cons on the president, whatever he says, I'm just very buoyed by the appointment of Dr. Franklin to this panel.
John McManus, what do you think of this effort on the part of the president to deal with the race issue?
I think it would be great if all Americans were treated as persons instead of what race they come from.
It would be nice, but
that's been a long-standing position of the Birch Society. And incidentally, that was part of the original 1964 Civil Rights Act. It said no discrimination by gender, by race, by color, by so forth. Within a year, they changed it and started affirmative action, which I think is an absolute horror.
I think that if affirmative action had not existed, John, which might make you feel good or bad, I don't know, I wouldn't be sitting here across the table from you. I got my doctorate from MIT at the time, was second African American woman in the economics department to do so. They were not admitting us. I had a magna cum laude graduate from undergraduate school, but my undergraduate school was also not admitting African Americans when I entered in 1970. Our classes were among the first classes. We were there because of affirmative action. Some doors had to be open. When you say let's not take anything into consideration, you've got to take race into consideration to basically deal with what exclusions there have been in the past and exclusions that exist into today.
Yeah, but why don't we judge people by what they are rather than their gender, their sex?
Why are there?
Well, you don't want it. You see, if you're in favor of affirmative action, you're not.
That's absolutely untrue. You're twisting my position. Affirmative action is about opening doors. It's about opening doors.
According to their group.
No, it says when people are underrepresented, when groups are underrepresented, you take that into consideration. It doesn't say you let unqualified people into the workplace. It doesn't say you let unqualified people into institutions of higher education. It says, just a minute, John, because this is the one issue, Brian. I don't know if you saw the Gallup poll this week that was a social audit of race. We're beginning as black and white people to think a lot more similarly. The Gallup poll had a problem. It didn't deal with Asians and Latinos. But as blacks and whites, we're beginning to think a lot more similarly about a number of things. But on the matters of affirmative action and government role, we continue to think differently because we continue to look at the world through very different lenses. 45% of all African Americans say in the past month they've experienced an issue of racial discrimination.
Let me ask John McManus to take a little time and give us your point of view on this. Like, for instance, if you were in the Oval Office and you were President of the United States, and would you do anything about the racial situation in the United States? And if you were going to go out to San Diego and make a speech, what would you say?
Well, what I would say is that we're going to judge people according to what they are. We're not going to favor one group over another. We're not going to say that rights belong to a group. We're going to say that rights belong to individuals. I think the whole concept is Marxist, and I don't know that there are many people who would say that.
Marxist?
Well, Marx always said, no, it isn't what you are, it's what group you belong to. And so I think it's horrible. I think it's a put down. I respect you. You're an educated woman. You went to MIT and so forth. Your claim is that if it hadn't been for affirmative action, you would never have gotten it. I don't know that that's so.
Based on the policies in 1974 when I was admitted, that indeed was so.
Then MIT is at fault.
But every other institution of higher education had the same policies.
No, it didn't.
Sadie Alexander was
I went
the first
to Holy
African...
Cross College in Massachusetts.
I know Holy Cross is up the street a ways. I went to Boston College undergrad. Yeah, but there were one or two.
There were blacks.
The dynamics of tokenism suggest that you let in one or two and say, gee, we're not discriminating. You know, there have been rules on the books. Some of our trade unions, some of our other organizations, New England College of Nursing, 1896, on their books, we will admit one Negress and one Jewess per year. This was a part of their charter.
You want that out? I want that out too. I don't like that. But I say don't go the other way.
What do you mean
discrimination to keep out is no better than discrimination to force in.
Let me ask you though about...
Force in?
Let me ask you about tomorrow. The president gives a speech at the University of California at San Diego. There's already a lot of copy in the morning papers about this, columns being written. He's appointing a 7-person advisory committee to advise him. Tom Kean, the former governor of New Jersey, is one of them. There's a lot of folks. You may know some of them on the list.
Dr. Franklin we've talked about.
Dr.
Yes.
Franklin, 3 whites, 2 blacks, 2 Hispanics, something like that?
3 whites, 2 blacks, a Hispanic, Linda
Asian?
Chavez Thompson from the AFL-CIO, and an Asian, Angela O, a young Korean attorney from L.A. It's a very good panel, I think.
Are you happy about this?
I am. Well, I'm always very skeptical about Bill Clinton because Bill Clinton likes to be liked. And because he likes to be liked, he equivocates a lot. But I think this is an excellent panel. Brian, if I were giving that speech at UC, I'd say something about acknowledging the past. You know, the biggest problem, from where I sit, is so many people are historically ignorant. When you challenge me about exclusion, that's just not knowing our history. Our history is a history of having excluded African American people. If I were Bill Clinton, I'd say, look, you know, we can't do anything about the past. Let's move ahead into the future, but let's acknowledge it. Why is there no monument to the contribution of slaves here in Washington? We've got monuments to everything else. Let us nationally embrace this past and move ahead. But no one wants to do that. That would be leadership.
Don't say no.
That would be leadership. That would be progressive. That would be something that I could take my nephews to and point to and say, this is what your people have given to the United States. This is why we want to be great Americans. Absent that, I'm not a patriot.
How about a monument to the Irish Americans that faced signs Irish need not apply? How about this? How about that?
Oh, please. Irish did not. Come on.
Please. I think we ought to acknowledge the past.
We are the only people. African American people are the only people who were forcibly enslaved. Yes, Irish were discriminated against, but they were not forcibly enslaved in this country.
Well, all right. They were forcibly brought into slavery by blacks in Africa who sold them to Americans. Right.
So the concept of slavery in Africa was quite different.
Right.
Was quite different from the concept here. This country benefited economically from slavery, John. Let's be clear about that. Benefited economically from slavery.
Slavery was going out. Slavery is not a very good economic
economically,
plan.
And we need to acknowledge it.
Let me ask John McManus. Let me go back to what our original conversation. Is there, you know, this debate's going to start tomorrow. I mean, it's right here on the front page of today's Wall Street Journal. And it's lead story. There's an interview with the president.
Okay.
And it says here in the interview, Mr. Clinton recalled going back to hope as a young adult and recognizing that the black children he played with never had the options he did. Quote, I just kept seeing all these young people that I thought were intelligent, appealing young people, and it just made me angry and sick that they didn't have any opportunities, Mr. Clinton said. Bigotry and discrimination, he said, are the products of an expression of people's disappointments or frustrations in their own lives, and this is just a sort of outlet for it.
Right.
Again, what can be done that will be positive, in your opinion, tomorrow?
To be positive, I think the president ought to go out there and he say, ladies and gentlemen, let's celebrate the fact that we belong to a United States of America that did away with slavery. Let's celebrate the fact that we did away with slavery. And let's now judge everybody according to themselves, not according to what group they belong to or gender or whatever else. And then I think that the president ought to say, you know, Ward Connolly is correct.
Ward Connolly is so misguided that it's not even amusing.
There's an awful lot of other blacks that feel the same way that Ward Connolly does. Now,
and there are lots who don't. Don't tell me who I speak for and who I don't speak for. You're way out of line there. You don't know enough about me to say that. You don't know enough about me to say that. I am president of an African American women's organization. I do speak for millions of African Americans. I wouldn't claim to speak for all, but I do claim to speak for many.
As long as you don't claim to speak for all.
We're going to go to the phone calls, and I want to try to get as many phone calls as I can. You do one of these shows, right?
Yes.
Where do you do it?
Which I have a radio show in New York, Julianne Malveaux's Capital Report. I fly up and report on what's happening here.
And when do you do it?
Mondays from noon to 1, 11:90 a.m.
And you have a magazine called The New American.
Correct.